Okay, I'm done. Let's talk about Galatians. And I did turn the TV on. I need to do this thing. Why is it not allowing me to do HDMI? Did I not plug it in? Great idea. Yeah, right.
Oh, they haven't started yet.
Oh, no.
Oh, okay. I think that was their signal. Yeah, that's why they haven't started to do it.
Anybody?
No.
Oh, there it goes. No, it's working. I think. No, still, I don't know what's going on. Maybe I won't show you. You got your Bibles in front of you. So. Okay.
Unplug your HDMI, plug it back in,
Yeah, that's what I just did.
and it should come up with a message.
There it is.
There it is. Oh, technology. Hey, all right. No, I don't want my daily verse thing. I just want Galatians. There's my first tab. We left off, I think we're at the end. Oh, did I bump it? Very good. No, oh, it's fine. We had just talked about the freedom of a Christian. Where's the Galatians? Come on, buddy. Here we go. Let's go.
Galatians page 1911.
Yes. So we're in chapter 5. Beginning at chapter 5. So it was 2 weeks ago, I think I just read this section and maybe preached about it for 5 minutes. But I want to go back. So I think I mentioned last time that Martin Luther wrote a treatise, which is one of his more famous ones, which is based off of this passage in Galatians, which is called On the Freedom of the Christian. Have you ever heard that one or read that one before? I'm not necessarily expecting you to, but it's required reading if you're a Lutheran seminary. Luther has an extensive volume of works. I think there's like 57 books that are just a collection of all the stuff that he wrote. He was very prolific. But there are several pieces that are kind of like cornerstone pieces, and on the freedom of Christians, one of them. It's based off of this. So let me read this again, and then we'll chat about it. Listen, I, Paul, am telling you that if you let yourself be circumcised, Christ will be of no benefit to you. Once again, I testify to every man who lets himself. In this case, they don't need to do the gender. They don't need to say man or woman, well, for reasons, but so every man who lets himself be circumcised, that he is obliged to obey the entire law. You who want to be reckoned as righteous by the law have cut yourselves off from Christ. You have fallen away from grace, for through the Spirit, by faith, we eagerly wait for the hope of righteousness. For in Christ Jesus, neither circumcision nor uncircumcision counts for anything. The only thing that counts is faith working through love. You were running well. Who prevented you from obeying the truth? Such persuasion does not come from the one who calls you. A little yeast leavens the whole batch of dough. I am confident about you in the Lord that you will not think otherwise. But whoever it is that is confusing you will pay the penalty. But my brothers and sisters, why am I still being persecuted if I am still preaching circumcision? In that case, the offense of the cross has been removed. I wish those who unsettle you would castrate themselves. A little harsh. For you were called to freedom, brothers and sisters. Not only do not use our freedom as an opportunity for self-indulgence, but through love become enslaved to one another. For the whole law is summed up in a single commandment: you shall love your neighbor as yourself. If, however, you bite and devour one another, take care that you are not consumed by one another. Okay, rolling up my sleeves. I didn't realize it was going to be this hot this early today. Because yesterday it was still like 50 when I woke up.
You can turn the fans on.
Well, I did turn it on.
You did? You're not working.
I turned them too far towards low, I guess.
I think, well, it's me going, oh, my pages.
Sure, yeah, that's a pretty good summary. Again, the context here is that the Galatians, these Celts in Anatolia, who have been very diligent in following the laws of Rome, right? In a way that only outsider groups can. Because again, these are people who have assimilated into Roman culture and Roman civilization, but have been kind of fighting an uphill battle to do so to a certain extent because they are or were outsiders, but have they've done the right things. So they're very accustomed to doing the right thing. And in this case, when somebody, and we're not told who, but it's somebody that's theoretically connected to Peter's church, comes and tells them, well, no. In order to become Christian, you have to convert through Judaism, right? You have to get circumcised, you have to do the things. They seemingly eagerly leap at the opportunity because it falls in line with what they are used to doing, which is you do the things, right? In this case, Paul's making the argument that in fact, by doing the things, by following these rules, you're not coming closer to God, you're distancing yourself from God. Because it has to do with Paul's understanding of how this whole thing works, in that by thinking that having a relationship with God means following a set of rules, you fundamentally misunderstand the nature of that relationship. Have you had this experience in personal relationships where they become transactional? Insofar as that, if you don't behave the right way, or the way that they want you to, this is a tool of abusers and manipulators, is setting a set of expectations for behavior that always seems to be moving and changing, right? It's never really about following the rules, it's about them having control over you. And that's kind of one of the arguments that Paul is making here. He's saying, earlier on, he's saying you're either enslaved to Christ or you're enslaved to the law. To be enslaved to the law is to be held subject to a set of rules that can change or may not be helpful. And he makes the point towards the end of this, the law is basically summed up in a single commandment, which is love your neighbor as yourself. And that, if anything, is about the sum total of what you need to be held accountable for. Martin Luther, I mentioned it last week and I finally looked it up because I had to make sure that I was right, and I was right, which is meaningless. But Luther, he posits that there are three uses of the law. And this is not stuff that's set in stone, but I think it's helpful. The first use of the law, I love the way he posits it. This is in your small catechism. The first use of the law helps control the violent outbursts of sin and keeps order in the world. So it's about controlling sin or controlling brokenness, or creating order. And the metaphor that he uses is it's a curb, and not the piece of concrete, finished concrete that's on the side of the road, but the thing that prevents you from going beyond this. It's the ditch, it's the boundary, right? It keeps us in one of our favorite kind of metaphors in Lutheran theology is to talk about two ditches, right? So the temptation is to think, again, that there's one right way to do things. That here's a set of expectations that you need to follow. When in reality, life is more about staying in between two extremes, right? Don't fall off on that side, don't fall off on that side. Try to navigate somewhere through the middle, but in reality, that there's a wide space open to you. That there's shades of gray. So the first use of the law is about that. It's about creating curbs, about creating boundaries, and in doing so, creating order in civilization and society.
How did that reflect in his opinion about the Catholic Church?
Put a pin in that. Let me talk about these other two, because we have to look at all three of them to talk about that. But that's a really good question. Second use of the law is as a mirror, and it shows us our sin. And this is where this is not coming specifically out of this text, but this is on the freedom of a Christian. This is basically one of the core things in there. And what this comes out of is it's the idea that, Luther, this is a very Luther thing, but it's the idea that the law drives you to grace. So it shows you your humanity, it shows you your brokenness, it shows you your fallibility. And in doing so, theoretically, you realize that there's no way that you can be perfect, right? There's no way that you can perfectly follow, the law, or perfectly fulfill expectations, or just be perfect in general. And so what it does is it forces you to realize how dependent you are on the content of grace. Does that resonate for anybody? Do you feel that way, or have you got it all dialed in?
I was told one time, if you're thinking about how did I sin today, that's a sin.
Well, yeah, sort of being preoccupied.
And that's the thing about stuff like this, is that it can quickly devolve into a law unto itself, right? In that, am I appreciative enough of my sinfulness today? And this is where a lot of Lutheran pietism comes out of, which is a kind of Scandinavian tradition of Lutheranism dating back, 50, 60, 100 years ago. I don't know if any of you had this experience, but when I was growing up, there were people, men mainly, who didn't feel worthy to participate in the Eucharist, and so they would only take the Eucharist maybe a couple times a year because they only would do it when they felt like they had appropriately felt penitent, right? Which is, again, it's kind of a specific type of pietism, but for me at least, feels self-defeating because it's like, so you're not worthy to receive grace? It's a pretty strong judgment that you're making there, And then the third use of the law is the debatable one, which this is the one Luther nerds get in arguments about, which I don't really have a lot of patience for, but it's basically the idea that the law teaches you what to do. The law is a teacher. And the reason people get worked up about this is when you get into the super grace people, which we often refer to as confessional Lutherans, they don't like any idea that the law is valuable. They don't like to say that the law is good, right? That the law can do good, because only God is good and only God is gracious. I think this is important personally, especially as it kind of relates to number one here. But a lot of life is learning to do the right thing. It's understanding you're not perfect. It's failing, and in failing, learning to behave better, right? That's what it means to live this way. It doesn't necessarily mean that that's how we relate to God. I mean, does God judge us because we mess up? I don't know. I don't think, I think that's where grace comes in. But at the end of the day, I think it's important actually that we have that.
Isn't that kind of a weird statement that the confessional would say, because you're saying the law is not good, but the law is the word of God, so therefore the word of God is not good.
Yeah, and this
really is.
And I'm biased.
Yeah, I know.
I'm biased in that, in this false dichotomy that's created in these White Tower arguments, there's missional and confessional, and I tend to fall towards the missional side, I suppose. Yes, I don't really hold any water for those categories. But, for folks that would articulate this distaste for the third use of the law, they are so wrapped up in the idea of grace being the only way that we relate to God, that any idea of the law being valuable is anathema. There's no short amount of anti-Semitism, in my opinion, involved in this as well too. They wouldn't articulate it that way, but often they'll articulate things like, well, the Jews were beholden to the law, but Christ freed us from that, right? And that's not helpful, but that's it. There is one great line that Luther has on the freedom of the Christian, which he derives from Galatians, and I'm paraphrasing, I can look it up. Basically, every Christian is Lord of all, subject to none, and also slave of all, Lord of none. So it's, again, this is those ditches, but it's this almost oxymoronic statement that we are simultaneously free. Nobody can tell us what to do, but at the same time, as a Christian, we're called to be in service towards our neighbor as well, too. And it's this duality that really describes a lot of what eventually becomes Lutheranism. So this is Dietrich Bonhoeffer, this is what he bases his ethics off of, is this idea. He uses the term of we are a completely free human being in that we can choose to do whatever we want to do, but at the end of the day, we're responsible for our actions, and that we justify ourselves in front of the divine. You know, is that, well, I chose to do this, and I'm going to have to take responsibility for it. And yet, we're still free to do whatever we want to, right? This gets into just kind of like theoretical ethical stuff, which is fun. But for him, it was specifically important because it was in and around his decision to choose to participate in the plot against Hitler, which was him taking responsibility for the fact that they were potentially going to do violence against a human being, but at the same time, needing to justify his actions, which is important. But can quickly get nerdy as well too. Any other thoughts, ideas, questions? Oh, how does this relate to the Catholic Church? How does this relate to the Catholic understanding? How does this relate to how Luther? So, not shockingly, in Luther's mind, he felt that these three uses of the law were specifically a response to what he thought was bad theology and simply kind of tyrannical bureaucracy on the part of the church, which makes sense. I mean, one of the things we have to keep in mind is the modern Catholic Church is not the Catholic Church of the 16th century, right? Things have changed, believe it or not. And one of the things that Luther saw, which caused him to do this whole thing, right, caused him to protest against the church, was he saw, similar to how it's articulated this morning in Matthew's Gospel, he saw people as a sheep without a shepherd. He saw them as being really being oppressed by the law and being oppressed by what had become a very rigid and cold and judgmental church, right? And his big problem with that wasn't just the institution, right? It wasn't just the effects that it had on people. It was that it created an image of God which was cruel and cold, right? And so he's articulating this as a response to what he felt to be draconian, right? Draconian usage of the law by the church. And so he's saying, no, I'm not, as Jesus, I came to fulfill the law, not abolish it. He's saying, no, the law is valuable for these reasons, right? It does create order in the world. It does drive us towards grace. It can give us the opportunity to do better. But at the end of the day, this is not how God relates to us. God isn't sitting up there. This isn't Santa Claus God, right? Making a list, checking it twice, the naughty and nice stuff. That's not how God relates to us. God relates to us through grace. Which, again, what is grace? Grace is confidence in God's mercy. Right? Grace is confidence in God's mercy. What do you think? Are we freedom doubt? Freedom 250.
In this Galatians,
Yeah.
what is it that brought this up?
Specifically, it's that the Galatians themselves had started to embrace a theology, a gospel of being held accountable to the Judaic law, right? To circumcision, to food regulations, that kind of stuff. And again, somebody came in from, according to Paul, somebody came in after he had spread the gospel there and had said, well, really, you need to be Jewish in order to be Christian. And Paul is saying, nope, not at all. In fact, not only is that not a requirement, in following that requirement, you are actually further distancing yourself from God. You are actually hurting your relationship with God by trying to adhere to these practices. Has this ever actually manifested in your own experience, where you have, in trying to be better, actually not gotten better? Have you ever felt that you were in a circumstance where trying to adhere to a standard of perfection or close to it actually did the opposite?
You can be too honest sometimes.
Be too honest. Well, that's an interesting thing, isn't it? Right? When it comes to truth telling and relationships, and what does it mean to tell the truth in a relationship?
Yeah, your new dress is really ugly.
Right? Right? And boy, learning, and speaking as a male of the species, learning the when, the what, and the how of that is very important. And you don't, at the beginning of a relationship, you have to err on the side of grace. you have to earn the right to, give input on your wife's outfits. Right? Which, to be fair, this is one of the things about Alento. She's such an engineer, is that she actually gets frustrated when I don't give her a valid opinion, right? If I think it's ugly and I don't tell her it's ugly, she gets ticked. She gets frustrated. So I've had to learn. Again, I've been learning. The law has been my teacher. Yeah. Go ahead.
Does she test you on that? Hope not.
Let's just say that she occasionally checks in to make sure I'm paying attention. It's did you notice my haircut? Did you realize this is a new dress? Yeah. Which I'm solid B plus at that stuff. Good enough to pass.
You briefly said something about Luther and Hitler. What was that all about?
Did I?
Oh, I
Well, you
must
said
be
something
hearing
about-
things
No.
now.
I don't think so.
Well, I thought you said something about Nazi or Hitler, one or the other.
Maybe not this morning, but
Bonhoeffer.
Bonhoeffer and Hitler.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
So Dietrich Bonhoeffer, right, was a German pastor and theologian who was executed. He was arrested and executed by the Nazi regime for participating in the plot to assassinate Hitler, right? And a whole lot of other stuff. He was, he is one of, in my opinion, he is one of the most important theologians of the 20th century. And for me personally, it's, very, very informative, influential.
And he struggled with his belief in God and
Absolutely, which I think is,
but he said it was necessary. It was.
I think that's the most important requirement, actually, is if you're not struggling with your theology and your faith and your politics and your philosophy, you're not doing it right. Right? So the name Israel means to struggle or strive with God.
We've been taught that if you question, you're a stronger Christian than if you just accept it.
Yeah. Which is not necessarily an opinion or a philosophy that carries through Christianity. Right? Well, blind faith, or blindly believing, or having inflexible faith in your authority or the teachings of your, the doctrines or dogmas of your religion. That's still a thing. And not only is that still a thing, might be the thing in the majority of the world, unfortunately. The encouragement or the desire to really genuinely struggle with your faith is much less popular road. Let's go on. Let's wrap up chapter 5 because I want to kind of get to the end chapter today, if possible, so that we can start something new next week. So Paul is starting to summarize his stuff. So the works of the flesh. Live by the Spirit, I say, and do not gratify the desires of the flesh. For what the flesh desires is opposed to the Spirit, and what the Spirit desires is opposed to the flesh. For these are opposed to each other to prevent you from doing what you want. But if you are led by the Spirit, you are not subject to the law. Now, the works of the flesh are obvious. Oh, are they? Oh. Sexual immorality, impurity, debauchery, idolatry, sorcery, enmity, strife, jealousy, anger, quarrel, dissensions, factions, envy, drunkenness, carousing, and things like these. I am warning you, as I warned you before, those who do such things will not inherit the kingdom of God. By contrast, the fruit of the Spirit is love, joy, peace, patience, kindness, generosity, faithfulness, gentleness, and most importantly, self-control. There is no law against such things, and those who belong to Christ have crucified the flesh with its passions and desires. If we live by the Spirit, let us also be guided by the Spirit. Let us not become conceited, competing against one another, envying one another. This for me is where Paul loses the plot a little bit. And he's doing, and this is my opinion, feel free to disagree with me. But what he's doing here is he's doing a rhetorical thing, which is, you make a point, sorry, this is a pendulum. You make a point, and the pendulum swings this way, and he's trying to make sure it balances back out again. Because one of the things that he's realized, is the thing, is that in preaching grace, right, this idea that you're under no obligation to adhere to certain standards of behavior in order to have a good relationship with God, or to be loved by God, that leaves an opening. It leaves a gap in your offensive line, which is that, people can say, well, it doesn't matter what I do then. I can behave however I want. I can live however I want. And God still loves me. Which is not necessarily wrong, but not helpful. And so now Paul is swinging the pendulum back the other way and talking about this duality of spirit and flesh, which is important, but I feel has been, I feel like unfortunately, especially because he closes with that, it drowns out the importance of the freedom aspect. And unfortunately, a lot of times people kind of skip over the freedom part and jump straight to this. This is the type of stuff you hear, you hear the preacher come in the pulpit talk about, right? This is the fire and brimstone. This is the what's that? Sinners in the hands of an angry God, that famous sermon from, 16th or 17th century. What's that?
Jonathan Edwards.
Jonathan Edwards, yeah. This is the type of thing that you hear on street corners, right? Live by the Spirit, not by the flesh. What's flesh? Well, it's whatever socio-political issues that person feels are most important. Which in the 21st century are homosexuality, abortion, transgenderism, whatever is the hot button topic that we want to argue and debate about. And they'll point to issues like that and say, well, this is an example of people living according to the flesh, but giving in his mind what are examples of living by the flesh. Because look, he says, now the works of the flesh are obvious, blah, 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 and things like these, right? So he's like, those things, right? Which again is not meant to be a comprehensive list. And again, these things are all very contextual. Sexual immorality in the first century common era was a very different beast from what we might think of sexual immorality in the 21st century, right? A lot has changed in terms of our understanding of the human body and human relationships. Sexual immorality in the first century would have been a woman, having a romantic relationship before getting married, right? Or a woman acting with independence at all in a society which very much owned the sexuality of that woman, right? So our brains automatically jump to the hot button topics of the day. That's not what Paul's brain was. The things Paul was probably dealing with are the things that any small town pastor has, propped up every once in a while, which is, Shirley cheating on Brad with Mark, or vice versa. I mean, it's outside. I didn't mean to put it in the hands of a woman, but it's stuff. It's just human messiness. And the point that Paul is making here is he's saying, here's the thing about following the law. Is that the law does not encourage good relationship with God. And actually, if you want to not have to worry about law all the time, just don't do stupid stuff. It's literally what he's saying here. He's saying don't get obsessed with sex and food and whatever. If you put those things in their proper place, you actually don't have to worry about this too much, right? Here's my best comparison. Does anybody work with people or I don't want to out anybody, but been through a 12-step process or known people that have gone through addiction counseling or addiction treatment? I mean, you don't have to raise your hands, but so here's one of the things that I learned because I took classes on addiction and spirituality, but I've also experienced, in my life and the lives of people that I've ministered to, is that one of the things that happens after you come through a process of struggling with addiction in any form is you very much actually, you're here very often, right? Because your life has been destroyed or almost been destroyed by this behavior. And you come out of it as a zealot a lot of the time. Here is the straight line, and I'm going to abide in the straight line. And a lot of times people come out of it with a very kind of, born again spirituality of I've made it through the darkest pits of my life, and I am on the straight and narrow. And in fact, we become very judgmental, right, of those who they were not so long ago. And that's just, I'm in no way criticizing, but it is the thing that Paul is talking about, which is because your brain has been so occupied with obtaining this experience, whether it's a substance or a behavior, because your brain has been so wrapped up with that, now that you are trying to avoid that thing, you need something else for your brain to glom onto, right? Which, you'll talk about people who are overcoming alcohol addiction and instead change to cigarettes, which, hey, lesser of two evils, right? Lung cancer, liver cancer, pick your poison. No judgment, but this is kind of the reality of human behavior, is that, in fact, we can get in a place where our brains are so wrapped up in the right or the wrong thing that we get obsessed with it almost. And this is one of the things I would point out every time I see somebody in the news, especially a public figure, a politician, who is railing away on one specific behavior. I'm like, what are you struggling with? What's going on in your bedroom? What are we going to find on your computer, right? That you are so obsessed with this. And because this is, how our brains work. We get enthralled by these things. And so Paul, helpfully, unhelpfully, is saying, if you can get yourself to a place where you're just not super concerned with that stuff, it's going to be better for you in the long run. So instead, put your mind not on sex and, booze and whatever. Put it on love, joy, peace, patience, kindness, and generosity. Thanks, Paul. God. He's not wrong. He is not wrong. Also, of debate as to its helpfulness. That being said, it comes back to this, which is God loves us regardless of who we are or what we do. And we will profit a whole lot more in our experience of the world and life if we can free ourselves from some of these obsessions, right? Now, I don't need to tell this to you guys. You guys have been there. Well, I don't know, but you've lived life. You've navigated pitfalls and road bumps or whatever.
But we've also all made mistakes.
And that's the point, right? And that's the point, is that, yeah, okay, Paul, I get it. You're not saying the wrong thing. And I get it, man. But I, every time, come back to, and God loves us. Full stop. Full stop. Regardless of what we do, right? But it would be better for you if you did this. You guys want to talk about sex, drugs, and rock and roll anymore, or should we? All right. This is good. This is Paul's conclusion. My brothers and sisters, if anyone is detected in a transgression, you who have received the Spirit should restore such a one in a spirit of gentleness. Take care that you yourselves are not tempted. Bear one another's burdens, and in this way you will fulfill the law of Christ. For those who are nothing think they are something, they deceive themselves. All must test their own work. Then that work, rather than their neighbor's work, will become a cause for pride. For all must carry their own loads. Those who are taught the word must share in all good things. What's Paul saying here? So this is the pendulum swinging back the other way. He just got done telling us, it's better if you don't do those things. Yeah, you're free in Christ, but stay out of that ditch. Now what's he saying? He's saying, carry your own. He's saying, now, don't get me wrong, you should absolutely help each other, right? In the same way that people who are struggling with whatever, be it addiction or just a rocky relationship or just struggling with whatever in life. You want to be there. That's absolutely part of being a Christian, is helping people carry their burdens. But at the end of the day, it's their burden. All right? It's their burden. And you've got your own burden. Do not be deceived. Do not think that because somebody else has a burden, which seems heavier than yours, that you're somehow righteous because of it, right? Because this is the temptation. This is where we fall into with the spirit-flesh talk, is we immediately do this, right? What's the thing they tell you when you point your finger at somebody, you got 3 pointing back at yourself? We do this thing where we start trying to point out sinfulness. This is the politician who's, railing about whatever topic in the hopes that we don't, pull up his browser history. Just keep your nose in your own business. It's essentially what Paul is getting at here. And here's what I like about this. Take it as you will. This is practical stuff, right? roadmap of human behavior that we need to navigate. And I'm going to throw a few hints in there, a few ideas of how to help you navigate it, because you totally asked me to. I'm being a little bit sarcastic here, right? But, Paul's on his pulpit, so give them roll. I expect that we've all experienced this in some form or another. Either having judgment cast on us by another who thinks we should do something differently or better. No, I'm the only one that's experienced that. Right? Or we have done that very thing where we have looked on the works or efforts of another person and invited our opinion, into that setting. This is the one, if you really want me to get angry, that's the one thing that will set me off very quickly. Is, if you ask me to do something, just let me do it. I'm going to do it my way, I'm going to do it in my time. Otherwise, do it yourself. Just keep your nose in your own business. I buy into this. I think this is pretty clear. And at the same time, don't let somebody bear a burden alone, right? Make sure you're there in solidarity and compassion in the midst of their struggle. Okay. Feel free to bring any of this stuff up, towards the end of this week. We can go back. We gotta go.
The hardest time
Yeah.
that I find to keep my mouth shut
Yeah.
is with my children.
Oh, heavens. Tell me more.
Well, they don't do things like I would,
Oh.
and I have to remind myself they're not me, and I have to let them make their own mistakes, or prove me wrong.
Right?
Not that I've stated that I have an opinion, I just wait until they prove me wrong.
Right? Yeah, shockingly, you can't really tell people what to do, can you?
No.
Even when you do, they don't do it until it's their idea. This is a common theme in my family.
Well, that's
right?
like I hear my mother's voice come out of my mouth sometimes.
Oh, dude. Oh, Lord. Yeah. Oh.
So
Yeah.
I was listening.
When I go back and I hear recordings of my dad, he used to, he and a buddy used to do bluegrass music, and they made a tape of themselves at one point, and they added an applause track to it. So for the entirety of my childhood, I thought my dad was a popular bluegrass musician because he had a tape of him performing and people cheering for him. I was convinced. It turns out later that no, he was Buddy Danielson, just recorded this and added the applause track afterwards. I thought it was the funniest thing they ever did. Granted, they were not bad. They were pretty decent musicians. But I go back and I listen to his voice in that tape. Sometimes I'm like, oh my God. It's not just a voice. I talk like him.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. Any other soul bearing that anybody wants to do? Okay. I get such a kick out of this. See what large letters I make when writing in my own hand. It is those who want to make a good showing in the flesh who try to compel you to be circumcised, only that they may not be persecuted for the cross of Christ. Even the circumcised do not themselves obey the law, but they want you to be circumcised so that they may boast about your flesh. May I never boast of anything except the cross of our Lord Jesus Christ, by which the world has been crucified to me, and I to the world. For neither circumcision nor uncircumcision is anything, but a new creation is everything. As for those who will follow this rule, peace be upon them, and mercy, and upon the Israel of God. From it's important. And what's so great about this is I can hear the self-awareness in his writing, where look at my letter that I'm writing to you. And then what he does at the end is he basically just gives them the short. He's like, here's the deal, guys. Here's the deal, right? The people that are going to ask you to follow these rules, they're doing it for themselves, not for you. They want to brag about how they're righteous because they got you to behave a certain way, when in reality, it's them trying to avoid their own crap, right? Which is, what I've already kind of alluded to. So he's like, here's the deal. Try and do this. Give it a shot. But at the end of the day, for those that, try, peace be upon you. Good luck. Peace be upon you, and mercy, and upon Israel God. Good luck. It'll be okay, right? Which is it's so beautiful because it contextualizes, passages and ideas and that so often get taken out of context and used as judgmental. I wish we would read the end of Galatians every time we read a letter of Paul, just as a way of contextualizing that what Paul is doing is Paul, a Jew, a man, a human being, is doing his best to help people navigate what is a growing and evolving faith, right? He's trying to help people do the thing that he's trying to do, which is follow the path that Christ has set before him. This is what I get when I hear him say, from now on, let no one make trouble me, for I carry the marks of Jesus Christ in my body. Which what I hear Paul saying is, I'm trying to carry the cross too, right? I'm trying to bear the teaching, bear the gospel as Jesus has given it to me. So give me a break, man. Just let me do my thing, And he's saying the same thing to those, in Galatia, or those in Rome, or in Corinth, or Thessalonica, or whatever. Is everything that he is teaching is essentially trying to help other people navigate the road that he's trying to figure out. So take everything with a grain of salt, And it doesn't devalue it. The very opposite, right? It actually, in my opinion, gives these passages greater value because all of a sudden they're not a set of rules that you're supposed to follow, right? What they are is they are the teachings of somebody who has learned these things by trying to do them themselves. Perfect timing. Who wants the microphone?
Give G for his time.
This is our last Sunday school for the summer, and then we'll start back up in the fall again. So one of the things that we challenged the girls to is that we made acts of service jars. So each week this summer, they have to open up their jar and do the act of service. So, you want to start? What was one of your acts of service?
Paint mom's nails.
Oh!
You told me to do it.
Hey, that's great, September.
I'll care for elephants.
There we go. And then the next one.
Take time for the animal shelter.
Oh.
What did she say?
Take some food to the animal shelter.
Did you want to share this?
I had also said give my mom a manicure.
I love it. Good job, Jamie. You've trained them well.
So I will, if you look on top, this is the cutest thing, this was Max's idea. So this is one of those containers that you push and then it opens, but we have little Jesuses on top. Okay, we'll figure it out. But before we leave, I'm going to ask you guys for one help on something. We have a very special 8-year-old birthday today.
Ooh.
And that's me, no, I'm just kidding. This little one right here, so I'm wondering if we can all sing happy birthday to
Absolutely.
September. Okay?
Happy
birthday to you. Happy birthday to you.
Happy birthday, dear September. Happy birthday to you.
So they're going to walk around real fast and kind of show you, and then we're going to go clean up the Sunday school.
Thank you very much. The day after I graduated from college, I got in my car and Dee Snyder's School's Out for Summer was on. That's the first thing that came to my head was, School's out forever. So, happy summer to all of our Sunday school kids. We are not, however, stopping for the summer. This school never takes a break. Actually, no, just a heads up, I'll be gone the 11th and the 18th in July. Instead of August, we're doing our Michigan trip in July this year, so those 2 Sundays I'll be gone. Thank you, Jamie. All right, we got five-ish minutes. Any thoughts, questions about Galatians, or otherwise, or anything involved therein, or anything completely unrelated? And also, what do you want to talk about next? Or is it just too hot and we're ready for now? That's kind of where I'm at.
Give us some choices.
Choices for next topic. Obviously, books of the Bible. I do do want to do more letters of Paul this year because that was a commitment that I made back in January. And we've only done 2. We've done 1 Corinthians and now Galatians. That leaves a lot of options. It's been a while since we've done any letters of Paul, so we've already done Romans before, but we could totally go back and do Romans. Same thing with Philippians. We could finish out Corinthians, do 2 Corinthians. There's also the non-Pauline Paul letters. So if you're not aware of the, we used to say all the letters that weren't Peter's letters or John's letters or James's letters or Paul's letters. Turns out that in fact Paul probably only wrote half of what we originally attributed to Paul. So there's I think Thessalonians is debatable, but then there's like 5 or 6 other letters. Anyways, we can do anything from the New Testament or the Old Testament, but I totally want to finish up. I want to do more Pauline stuff. We also haven't done really Old Testament stuff in a while, but my thinking would be since I kind of want to do something that wraps up by the beginning of July, which only gives us maybe 3 weeks. Probably not Genesis. That's a long one, but we could do one of the shorter books like Ruth or Amos or one of the minor prophets are always fun. Alternatively, there's plenty of topical stuff. So if there's a topic that you're interested in discussing, that's good. I mean, we just did forgiveness.
What would you say is one of the most obscure, minor prophets?
Oh, obscure?
Oh, the least addressed or read.
Obadiah. The thing is a lot of these, not the value, but a lot of the minor prophets are very contextual. So they're short and they're speaking to a very specific thing, which doesn't mean we can't look at them. Obadiah, which I always remember, Obadiah. Obadiah, Hezekiah, Malachi.
What about Joel?
Joel, we could look at Joel. Joel is a non-Pauline.
Yeah, I'd be interested in
Okay.
some of these more
Maybe-
less read.
Here's a great idea. You know what we do? When we show up next week, I probably should cut something. But I'll tell you what. Talk to me this week. Shoot me an email. And when we come in next week, I'll have a couple of things prepped. But we can actually, over the next couple of weeks, just kind of bop around between some of these minor texts that we don't look at too often. Because I'm just going to tell you straight up, we're probably not going to want to spend a lot of time with Joel or Obadiah. And it's not that it doesn't have value, but there's a reason that it doesn't pop up in our lectionary too much. Which again, it's not that it's bad, it's just that it's very kind of contextual. So a lot of these later or latter epistles in the New Testament are things that are really kind of narrow in their application. And it's usually a letter, about a specific topic. It isn't bad. It's not a multi-Sunday conversation. Okay, let's do that. I'll shoot, if you got, so Joel's on my list, Obadiah's on my list. You got something that you want to take a peek at, like Jude. Hey, Jude.
Well, even this one, Nahum?
Nahum.
I mean, it looks, I haven't read it, but it looks more like just poetry.
That's probably not far off the track, yeah. The line between prophecy and poetry is turbulent. There's which it's a whole other topic unto itself. In a world where information is almost always transmitted orally, how do you get people to remember what you're talking about? You make it memorable. You use, rhyme and mnemonics and, like Psalm 115 or 119 is not an acronym. It's when A, B, C, D, E, F, G, it follows, each stanza begins with a letter of the alphabet. I just forgot this and remembered it and forgot it again. Anyway, so complicated. All right, thanks folks. See you next Sunday. What's next Sunday? Next Sunday is the 21st, and the 28th, and the following Sunday is the 4th of July. I'll still do Bible study. I don't see why not. And then the following week will be gone. So 3 weeks. We got 3 weeks to do whatever. See you, Marcia.